I'm James Reynolds, and I'm a pastel artist. We're doing a pastel painting of, it's near Jenner, it's the coast of Sonoma County. Hello AWS people, by the way. We're doing this for my dear friend Jerry Fabiano asked me to do a little thing on shadow and light, and how I pick colors that convey the sense of light and shadow to indicate form in a painting. So this is sanded paper, which makes a huge difference for pastel because it has what they call tooth. It can grab pastel very, very well, and if you paint on smooth paper, it clogs up really fast. So you want to have a little bit of a rough surface. You can put about 25 layers of pastel on this stuff. So what I do is for many years, I do an alcohol wash. Normally I put all the color on and then I do this, but you know, bear with me. So I kind of have this rule of one color per area. And as you can see from my choice here, this color is relatively arbitrary because it's not a really green sky, but there it is. I just try to pick a color that isn't going to cause me problems later. So just blocking in big chunks of color. Sometimes you end up covering up things. You have to try to find them again. So I just covered up all the rocks. Oh well. So let's get a color for the rocks. Kind of dark, but there it is. And I do have a reference photo I'm working from. And I do a lot of fiddling in Photoshop to strengthen the composition. And let's see, for the hillside, maybe something crazy. The color doesn't matter that much, but it's a warm color. It's a little lighter than the shadow color, but I can change it. This is a very forgiving medium. You can do a lot of crazy stuff, and you can recover, you know, the idea later on. You can fix things very easily. I like to keep a collection of the colors I'm using in a little tray, so I know what I'm doing. I can keep, you know, keep them handy. Okay. So, oh, it's too dark. Need something light for its bushes. That's very, very light. So this is too dark and the yellow is too light, and that's fine. You know, we're just getting color down. It'll all work out. So this alcohol stage, it does a few things. It gets rid of the white paper, you know, because otherwise you're going to be having these little speckles of white. You have to chase them all down if you're that kind of painter, which I kind of am. I don't want to have to get my finger, you know, you can go like this and do the same thing basically, see? but then you don't have fingerprints anymore. And it also just, this is quicker, and it makes the pastel material sink deeper down into a deeper layer of the paper, so that you have, basically, when you're done with this and the stuff dries, it's like you have a fresh, unaltered sheet of paper. So you're saving yourself a layer. It's also, it makes it kind of more like a painting that, you know, when you think of a painting, you think of fluid paint. This is still a painting, it's just a dry medium paint, but it is fun to kind of make a mess with a brush and have these artifacts from the paint process. When it's fluid, you just see this interesting stuff happening. Because if you're just applying it with your finger, it's a little bit flat. So I enjoy this phase because I'm also an oil painter, and this is a lot more like painting with paint. Okay, so I don't really have a sequence for which colors I brush on first or anything. I just kind of, and I don't really clean my brush properly. I just kind of go for it. I paint these big blocks of color. I'm really just trying to avoid this really serious dark blue because it just muddies everything up. It's a super strong color. It's kind of impossible to avoid completely, but this also tends to make for a more abstract beginning, where the painting is a little bit out of control and you're losing a lot of detail. The pencil marks I made are, a lot of them are getting buried, and that's just part of it's a crude instrument. I could take a little more time and use a smaller brush, but honestly I kind of like the out of controlness of the brush because it's against my personality, which is pretty controlling as far as painting. Okay, so I'm just kind of throwing some of this blue that's still on the brush out in here because I've got some stuff happening when I'm looking at the picture that it's like kind of indicating form a little bit. Okay, no. All right. So the sky is almost totally dry already. This is rubbing alcohol. I think it's like a 95% or 75%. It's mostly not water. So it evaporates really fast, which you want. So I tend to mix up different kinds of pastel as I'm working. These are softer pastels. So if this weren't dry, it would be a real mess. You want to make sure it's dry. It's just a blue sky. Some of that green will poke through, and that's fine. Sometimes I just grab a crazy color like this, yellow, because why not? I'm just going to reattach this paper like a watercolor artist might do, because it's expanded and gotten, it's absorbed this moisture, and if you, sometimes you put a little too much of this stuff, but anyway, it should dry a little tighter, you see, and shrink up. Hopefully this tape will stick. So, crazy yellow, because I can. Now on a sky passage like this, sometimes I'll take my finger and blend a little bit. It just makes things recede into the distance somewhat. This painting is really not that much about the sky, but it's, you know, it's still a teaching moment, I guess. Anyway, as far as basics of painting, things that are further away tend to be less contrasty. You know, things that are closer are more contrasty. So you can leave some of these marks in the closer areas and rub them out in the further away areas. It's just a possible way of conveying distance. Okay, so as far as how to pick colors, this is a kind of a blue that's a nice shadowy, it's purpley blue that is, I imagine, the color that the sky, you know, when something's in shadow, it's not pitch black, it still has light on it. It's light reflected down onto it from the sky. So every color, all this grass on the foreground is going to be bluer when it's in shadow. It's not just grayer or darker or something, it's bluer. So I often put my finger, my little pinky, on the surface as I'm making marks. So my hand is kind of pivoting like that, and it's that control thing, I guess. I do like to be able to control, so if I put the fingernail on the surface, it doesn't really damage the painting, but I can move my hand around. It's kind of like having one of those, what's that bar called, Jerry, that painters use?
Yeah, it's called a stick.
Technical term.
Yeah, I don't remember the sophisticated French term for it.
So the traditional thing would be to go like this. Rest the bar against the surface and go like this. Maybe even like this. Which, when you're doing oil and you stick your finger in the surface like that, it makes marks every time you move it around. I still do it, I just wipe my finger off and So when I look at the painting, I don't see a lot of this dark, shadowy area contrasting very well with the lit area. So partly I've got this darker brown in here and I've got this lighter brown in here. So I think to convey what we're trying to convey, I'll get a little bit darker blue down here. Just using the edge of the stick.
James, if I may ask, why do you choose blue in the shadow areas like that to convey this? It's very effective, but if you would speak to that, I think it would be helpful to the audience.
As I was saying, the sky is reflecting color down onto the ground because the sun only hits what it hits and everything else is in shadow. So blue it's not like it's actually accurate. It's just a stage for me in the process. I will come back and my whole thing is like, make a mistake, fix it. You know, it's no problem. Just go ahead and paint. You know, keep at it, and things kind of get better as you keep painting. But blue is part of the general feeling of what's happening on the sky. This is a color that's brownish. Just this stick here. It's brownish, a little bit similar to someone's skin tone, but it's kind of yellowish too. And to me, it has blue in it. It's been muted down from yellow into something more neutral. And it's probably more accurate as grasses in shadow, you know what I mean? But then the blue all around that kind of stuff hopefully conveys a feeling of shadow. All you're doing is creating illusions, you know, and you have to just kind of go till it feels right to you. I'm not saying till it feels realistic because I don't care that much about realism. I want to express a feeling, and I like stuff that's feels at least relatable, like I feel like I could go out there and take a walk, but it doesn't have to be actually realistic. But blue is just kind of like a place, it's a placeholder. And then later on, you just get closer and closer to something accurate. Purple is very, very handy for conveying a feeling of shadows. See, and this is a very, very intense purple stick, and it might feel insane to use a stick that color, but it's such a close value to this blue. See these two sticks, that bit of blue and that bit of purple, they're very close in value. See, value meaning dark light. So they kind of are neighborly. They feel comfortable next to each other to me. Sometimes I'll just see something, looking at a photo, and I'll just go, you know, I just feel like doing something insane, and I'll grab a red, I don't know what it is. It's like a little bit of fire, you know what I mean? Just, it's not rational, it doesn't make sense, but it feels like it needs vitality. And this can be toned down later. You know, it's fine to screw up, as I say.
If I may ask about that, using the red, we've gone now into a color that's considerably warmer than the blue and purple you were using.
Right.
And that contributes to what I would address here as this mystery of what goes on inside of shadows.
So here, I'm doing something really crazy now. Just, what the hell are you doing? Yeah, I like a feeling of mystery and accuracy in a painting. I'm trying to just get closer to something. I don't know what, but what I do often is I look at my source material without my glasses. You know, I kind of look like this because it gets very blurry, and it helps me to, you know, not to see things from a little bit more helicoptery, like further out view, you know. Yeah, I don't know what the red did, but I think it's interesting. And this pink is also like super hot. It's a very, very hot color to be involved in shadow, but really it's interesting as an edge color between a shadow and a lit area. I mean, I notice that there's often a fringe of crazy color at the edge of a shadow that's starting. You know, there's something really wild about that. So, and then the marks themselves can contribute to a feeling of excitement and a sense that it's grasses, but it's really just mark making, and it doesn't have to be like a blade of grass. In fact, I kind of rail against the idea that I'm painting grass. I try to paint from a little further outside than it just feels myopic to me to paint blades of grass, and I do it because I can't help it, but I'm trying to be free. I'm trying to free myself from these tendencies to be in control of everything, like so, you know, they're just scribbly marks, and hopefully it turns into something eventually. I always try to have some kind of transition from one side or on top to bottom where the eye can see movement across a form where it's darker or more color, more saturated or something on the left, and it's more muted or brighter on the right. So I'm going to flip the picture real quick. Well, I often do this. I turn things upside down because I can see them fresh again after I've been staring at something for a while. It's sometimes hard to see it. I think a lot of people do this. Just It's very hard. It's very hard to still see fresh and clearly. So it's just a trick or an aid.
Yeah, it's interesting. While a lot of us will turn our work upside down, to see it, so to speak, with fresh eyes, I think fewer of us will continue to work on something
Really?
upside down.
Well, it helps me. I really, I almost always do something, at some point I'll turn things over and start working upside down. It's not really it's not complicated. It's not Jimi Hendrix, you know, playing the guitar backwards or something. It's just easy. It's actually easier. If, like me, you know, it's hard to see it after a while. It's kind of messy medium. I'm just slowing the pace down a little. Something I always try to do is have multiple colors adjacent to each other, because they're just more interesting to look at. I'm not sure how rational or conscious it is. These are all shadow colors in this painting, and here's another one. These are all, so you got purples and blues, and this kind of a blue-green. You got this weird thing. There's also some red in there, but I don't know. As far as picking colors, I lean into blue and purple, and then I try to have variety within that, and then I keep looking back to the source material. I may take this dark tree color and try to indicate some darker darks, because I feel like they're all kind of too similar, and I'm not seeing enough of a feeling of dark stuff going on to further define the forms. So I think number one, I think value, it has to be dark enough. Number two, temperature, it has to be the right degree of cool versus warm. And that's another one of those mystery things, like what is that really? What's really going on? Some people swear that when you have a shadow in a warm source of light and a shadow, the shadow should be cool, and when you have a cool, and the other way around. And I just don't know that I really have seen that myself. It's partly color, but it's a lot of it's other stuff like value and temperature, which are components of color. I'm not really much of a scholar. I kind of paint intuitively, and I try to observe nature and refer to my source, you know, pretty like I really rely on just feedback from reality. I don't paint abstract because I don't know what to do. I just look and I go, I'm done. What do I do? You know, I need something to look at, you know. And I find that a great source of reassurance when I'm painting. I look at something and I go, oh, I know where to go. I know what's missing. Again, not to be hyper realistic, but because nature is my subject, I'm painting, at least it's my inspiration. This purple, we've established this as a shadow color, but I'm also sticking it out here in the field where it's in sunlight. And partly that's because I want the painting to have echoes of colors throughout, so there's stuff, you know, the color isn't just occurring in one place, it's recurring and bouncing around. So that's a kind of principle, but it also is because even though this field is lit, there are blades of grass next to each other and some of them are shadowing each other, so there's a little bit of a shadow even in sunlit areas because it's a surface with texture. You know, it has more than just light going on. It also has some shadow feeling in it and some actual shadows happening. They're just secondary, but I do believe that it helps to just play around with putting things in sometimes what seems like an illogical place, and it just seems to work out eventually, if you know what I mean. I also tend to go a little past the money with stuff, and then I pull back and reapproach and try to do better, and it's just a process of like, did that work? Yes, that worked. Oh wait, no, maybe that didn't work so well. You know, you just keep at it till something starts happening that feels good. Sometimes I'll take, if I feel like I went too far, I can lift off some of the pigment with my finger and put it down somewhere else. It decreases contrast. Like that's very dark and that's lighter, so if I go like this and get some of that on my finger and put it on top of that, you see how much less dark that becomes. And this whole area, like say these trees, they're like the darkest dark in the painting. And if I wanted to be rash, to be consistent with the theory of atmospheric perspective, this stuff should be darker and this stuff should be not as dark. So you can kind of decrease the darkness. I got pastel dust on my fingers and I can lighten an area. It's sort of like tuning. If I wanted to lighten that a little bit, I could just kind of tamp on it a little bit. And it just makes it kind of go back in space a little. Okay. Let's use this. Well, what I'm doing here is I'm just looking back and forth and seeing that it's not really strips of color, it's kind of broken up, and I'm trying to convey that feeling of finer, smaller bits of things, and this leaves a fairly convincing kind of mark although it does obliterate stuff, so I might come back and see, make deposits and color just with kind of in a line, but I just fiddle around till I feel like something good is happening. I think a painting works on a lot of levels, and when I'm starting out, I'm doing more crazy, bold, experimental, playful stuff, and then eventually I feel like I've gotten to where I can do refinements, like these little, they're like bits of trees, you know, and I find them delightful because I want to know what I'm looking at, and I love nature, you know, so I put in details like that, hoping it's still a bold enough painting, and that I'm not going to fall in love, like you were saying, with some novel kind of mark, and then it just gets boring so quickly. But I kind of feel like an obligation to honor the tree, you know, like I want to paint something, I want to be worthy of my subject, and, you know, feel that the tree would approve, you know, and not feel like I painted a boring tree. But also there's this whole, there's the initial laying in, and then there's all this refining and, you know, thinking of it as an overall thing from more of a design standpoint, how to modulate all the parts so they start to come into a feeling of unity, you know, and a wholeness. And you can't do that from the beginning necessarily. I mean, you can try for principles that get you there, but in the beginning you're just kind of throwing yourself into the breach, you know. You really don't know what you're doing till you get to a certain level of completion, you know, and then there's all sorts of subtle tweaks. So we're gonna call it a day for now for the purposes of the video. I'll keep tinkering on it. When it's done, I'll maybe have a final photo of it. But shadow and light, it's a fun thing to try to explore, and I do love the mystery of shadow colors, and they really do say so much about what the sunlight is doing. So I hope it's been informative, and I hope you keep painting and keep the faith, keep practicing, get better, because we do get better, but you got to keep painting to get better.